Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. As we mentioned before, the Danites were originally aimed at Mormon dissenters. When did they turn their sights on Missouri mobs? We'll find out more about that with historian Steve LeSueur. He's the author of the 1838 Mormon War in Missouri, and we'll find out more about the Danites. Check out our conversation. Well, cool. I wanted to ask one more question with regards to the Danites. Could we view them as kind of a precursor to like the Nauvoo Legion? I mean, I know the Nauvoo Legion was kind of a legal force and the Danites were never formally recognized, but are they kind of a precursor? Can we think of them like that?
That's a good question. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. I don't know that because they're not a legal group. Maybe they're more like the Council of 50, secret organization, secret in the sense of they meet secretly, not secret in the sense people don't know who they are. And back to something we were talking about, and I'm sorry, I won't answer your question because I don't know how to look at them as a precursor, is the question of, well, so when did the Missourians start worrying about the Danites? And on the one hand, although we can't pinpoint, for sure, well, this is the point, that by September, in August, at the Gallatin election battle, as we call it, that's where the Danites in Daviess County come together to fight the Missourians. That there was a man by the name of William Penniston who was running for office. He was a Whig, running for as a state representative. He wanted the Mormons' vote. He campaigned heavily among the Mormons to get their vote. I think the Mormons maybe had about a third of the votes in Daviess County, so it was important to get them. But the Mormons were by and large Democrats, and so they weren't going to support him. And so once he figured that out, that he wasn't going to get it, he and some of his supporters went to Gallatin and tried to stop the Mormons from voting there,
because they were supposed to stay in Caldwell County.
Yeah, and I'm sure he would have been fine with the Mormons staying in Daviess had they voted for him. I mean, that's my opinion. That
right.
The sticking point for him right then was he wasn't getting their votes.
So I don't want you voting for my opponent. Yeah.
And so any case, before the vote started, and it appears that they had a voting booth, a building they went into. They probably went in and by voice vote just said who they were going to vote for. So before the poll opened, he liberally passed out the drinks to his supporters, and then started bullying one of the Mormons, and or one of his supporters did. And when a couple of Mormons tried to step in, then more Missourians started clubbing them. And then John Butler, seeing this, gave the Danites signal of distress and recognition and said, "Come on, Danites, I've got a job for you." And John D. Lee, who was there and a Danite, said he didn't know who John Butler was, but he recognized the Danite signal of distress there.
Right.
And all of a sudden, that all these Mormons converged, and although they were outnumbered, were able to essentially hold their own and drive the others, drive the non-Mormon brawlers from the field.
Okay.
So in any case, the Missourians there, perhaps heard him yell, the Danites. Then in September, there were some affidavits signed by some Mormon dissenters who left and signed affidavits to the effect of, something strange is going on, and there's this conspiracy among the Mormons. And then in September, mid-September, some Missourians started harassing George A. Smith and saying, "All right, tell us the secret Danite signs." They were making fun of him. Tell us what are these secret things? And Smith said he had some fun with this guy. He says, all right, get down on your knees and, put this stick on your nose and walk around, or something like that. And the guy was doing it until his other friends started laughing at him and saying, he just made a fool of you. But in any case, the Missourians knew enough about the Danites that they were asking the Mormons, about them in mid-September.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it was pretty easy to turn the Danites any way Joseph wanted to. Whereas before they were a Mormon force, now they were going after Missourians. Is that fair?
Well, I mean, they did at the Gallatin election battle, but that was, out of necessity. Mm-hmm. Now, when the conflict started in earnest was in October, and the events leading up to that were essentially in DeWitt. Remember, we had in July the vigilantes, told the Mormons, you got to leave. Then they had a vote. The Mormons still wouldn't leave, and so eventually they laid siege to DeWitt.
The Missourians laid siege to DeWitt.
Yeah, the Missourians did, and the Mormons couldn't hold out, and also the state militia was called out to block the vigilantes, but and General Parks was the general in charge, but his men mutinied. And one of the mutiny, leaders of that mutiny was Samuel Bogart, captain, and because they sympathized with the vigilantes. And so Parks withdrew his force because he was afraid his state militia was going to join the vigilantes. The Mormons appealed to the governor, and the governor did not give them any relief. In fact, the word that came back to them was the governor said, well, it's between the Mormons and their neighbors. They got to fight it out. Whether the governor actually said that, he claims that's not what he said. That he thought that there was sufficient, local authority to deal with them, but he should have known better. And essentially, whatever answer he gave, left it to the Mormons and Missourians to fight it out. And so the Mormons finally surrendered. They returned to Far West, October 13, 14, around there, bedraggled. Maybe 2 or 3 people may have died from exposure or, whatever from the siege. So when they came back.
And the siege happened in what month again?
October.
Oh, so this is all still in October. Okay.
Yeah, October, a siege of DeWitt, that is.
Yeah.
And it had actually started, much earlier, and through a variety of reasons, just didn't really get going until later September and then into October. So when they come back, the vigilantes now in Carroll County said, having been successful in driving the Mormons back to Caldwell. And by the way, I should make this point, at the beginning and the initial conflict, and at this point, the idea the Missourians were not trying to drive the Mormons from Missouri. They were just trying to get them to go back to Caldwell. And so they were successful. Meanwhile, there had been problems in Davies, after the Gallatin election battle. And I know you and Alex talked about some of that, like the Danites going up to Adam Black's house. He was a judge, and getting him to sign a paper to say, he wouldn't molest the Mormons and he would be a fair judge. But in any case, there had been some problems in Davies County. So now, after the vigilantes are successful in driving the Mormons back to Caldwell in Carroll, they say, all right, we'll go help the Davies citizens do the same thing. And now there may have been some at this point, because hostilities escalated. Maybe some of them were thinking, we'll drive them from the state. But their main goal was, again,
get them into Caldwell.
So now the vigilantes are on the move to Davies. And so on October 14th, a Sunday, the DeWitt Saints have come back to Far West, And Joseph and Sidney and the Mormons, they're mad. They're understandably upset, and they know what's going to happen in Davies. And so Joseph and Sidney rally the citizens and the troops, and they say, that Joseph says, we'd be fools now to call for the law to help us, that we've called and they never help. It's always used against us and never for us. And Sidney says, and Sidney is tired of the Mormons like John Corrill and Reed Peck and others who have been wringing their hands, up to this point about the Danites and we're being too militaristic. And they're saying, and he says, we ought to, he calls them, oh, don't men, because they're always saying, oh, don't do this. Oh, don't do that. And so he says they should be put on their horses by pitchforks and forced to ride with the troops. And then Joseph suggests, well, those who refuse to go and fight in Davies, those Mormons, they should have their property given to those who will fight. And then they also Joseph says that tells them we're going to live off the land of our enemies' crops and livestock because we're at war. And so they gather about 300 or 400 soldiers, and the next day, October 15th, they ride to Davies County.
Mormons ride to Davies County.
Yeah, and so now here it's you were asking about the Danites and being an external, or going against their the Missourians now, and not just for internal regulation. At this point, it's a little unclear. Are these state troops? State militia, the Mormons, or from Caldwell? Is it the armies of Israel, and or is this the Danites? It's hard to say because
members are members of all three, right?
and also after the war was, after everything's over and the Mormons are put on trial for this, and they are saying, they are careful to say, we did everything legally. These are state troops, this, and this. But I don't really think that was the case at the height of conflict. It didn't matter whether you were a Danite or, a member of the state militia or whatever. You were going up there to help. And, right. So it's a little unclear, though a lot of these men were Danites and were formed into some of their Danite companies as well. So
okay. And so the Mormons went to Davies and did some burning and looting and that kind of thing. Is that what happened?
Yes. And so they arrived on the 15th, and then on the 18th, they went out on their first forays, and they went into, there were 4 groups, and one group went into Gallatin. That was led by Apostle David W. Patton, Captain Patton. He was also known as Captain Fear Not. Mm-hmm. And they went in, and there were some Missourians there. And when they saw them coming, according to one account, they were so frightened that they ran out and they cut the reins of their horses' reins that were tied up to the posts. They cut them with knives so they could get away and run away quickly. So when the Mormons came, there were very few people there. And so the Mormons then looted the stores and took the property and then burned most of the buildings. And so, one of the issues where Dr. Baugh and I disagree is he argues that, Joseph Smith, was very particular. He said, we are going to, live off, take property and possessions and livestock because this is war, but only against our enemies, and so it was, only those, Mormons after Joseph left, Diamond went back to Far West. Then some Mormon soldiers, zealots and extremists, went beyond what he ordered or wanted to do. But I don't find that's the case, that we don't really know what Joseph intended, because Joseph denied that any of this happened, in his sworn statements, and by him and Hiram and Lyman White. they said the Missourians burned their own homes, and we didn't do anything. And Lyman White said, I never even left Anamon during this whole period. I was home. My wife was sick, and so we don't know what Joseph said from Joseph himself. We do know, what other people said, that there was, Joseph was in charge, and set the general direction. But we also and we also do know, and Alex points this out, is there were instances where the Mormons, in essence, said, are you a mobber? And no, I'm not. And so they let the person go. And it was only they were looking for weapons and things like that. However, we also know that there were cases where they did burn the homes and property, or stole the property of people who were friends. Among them, when they went into Gallatin, they stole the property from Jacob Stolling's store. And he was the fellow who had lent the Mormons goods on credit. So he was not a mobber. And they stole all of his receipt books and his notes of, who owed him what, and which he never got back. He in later years, he wrote to Joseph and said, you can give me those books back. I'll forgive all the Mormon debt, all the debts against me. But in any case, he was one. Another was this fellow Joseph McGee, who was he was a tailor in Gallatin, and he was there when the Mormons took his property, but they let him go. They said, "Oh, that's just little Joe McGee, let him go." But that didn't stop them from burning the store, stealing the stuff. So, in any case, that's what. And so, the question of what was Joseph's intent, hard to say. He may have said, or intended just the enemies. But once you unleash this thing, that they're all going, that it's hard to tell who's an enemy and who's not.
Yeah, friendly fire.
And the Mormons brought in cattle and pigs and crops, from all over the county. Did they always know who they were taking it from? Hard to say. And then also, and then the people who did, that there were some people who did speak out against this. And George Hinkle says that he came to Joseph and said, this burning and plundering, he says, it's going to bring the whole state against us. But Joseph told him not to worry, everything would turn out okay.
But it didn't.
It didn't. And so I know, Alex thinks, my presentation, this view of things. Oh, one other, well, before I get to that, is continuing on, well, what happened there? So all of this property was brought into Anamon, that from Gallatin, cattle and pigs were brought in. But the idea was that they'd put all the property in the bishop's storehouse. It was consecrated and then to be given out, so that wasn't stealing if they did it that way.
Oh boy.
And on that day, the 18th of October, Lyman White rode to Millport, another town, and it was deserted. And he came back, and they talked about, well, you didn't take anything. No, I didn't. It was deserted. Okay, so that was the 18th. The expedition, the forays continue. On the 20th, Joseph Smith is still there, and the Mormons have captured the cannon that had been brought in by the vigilantes. They captured the cannon and they brought it back to Far West. The Mormons did, and so they fired it off. Here, I'm going to look at a couple of things here if I can find them. So they bring back the cannon, and they fire it off 3 times, and everybody shouts, Hosanna to God and the Lamb. And so, after that, let's see. Okay, yeah, here we go. So they fire off the cannon, And then after they're finished, Joseph steps up and he says, he drew a sword and he lifted it high above his head and he said, I have drawn my sword from its sheath, and I swear by the living God that it never shall return again till I can go and come and be treated by others as they wish to be treated by me. And fair enough, he's just saying, I've demanded my rights, but in essence, this is war. I've drawn my sword. And this is Joseph in charge. This isn't Hinkle or Lyman White or Sidney Rigdon or the Danites. All of these people, whether it is the Danites or whether it's Lyman White, they're following Joseph Smith. And so that's sort of back to your question of, well, did Joseph direct the Danites? Well, no. I mean, they had their meetings and he went in there and endorsed them. But, when push came to shove, it was Joseph they went to for direction. It was Joseph who said, we're going to do this, we're going to go there. And it's Joseph who's drawn his sword and said, this is my intention. And so then, and the day after, the next day after Joseph does this, Lyman White goes back with his company to Millport. And then they take the property and they burn the town. And they tell Josiah Moran, among others, their friend of the Mormons, they tell him he's got to leave. They threaten him and tell him to leave, and they come back. And so this was all done. All of these activities were done while Joseph was in Adimondayaman, was in Davies. So the plundering of Millport, of Gallatin, the other places, it wasn't done by extremists or zealots, who were out of the mainstream. I mean, you could say they were zealots, but they were zealots for Joseph, and they were not, they were not doing anything he didn't know they were doing. As I said, there were some Mormons who said, this is crazy, that Joseph was okay with it. This is what we have to do. And so then he comes back, to Far West the next day after this was done. And so it was these activities then that alarmed Missourians. I mean, that this is what then moved the needle from the Mormons got to be driven back to Caldwell to the Mormons, are in rebellion.
Okay, so this is basically October 18th onward, right?
Yes, yeah. And again, just to reiterate my point, Joseph, gets back to Far West, and in a contemporary journal, Albert Rockwood, lauds, he's writing a letter to his parents, and he lauds Joseph's leadership, and he says to his parents, you may ask if the prophet goes out with the saints to battle. And I answer, he is a prophet to go before the people as in times of old. And Brother Joseph has unsheathed his sword, and in the name of Jesus declares that it shall not be sheathed again until he can go into any country or state in safety and peace. So essentially, he's quoting that same speech that was given. Okay. And so, yeah. And so again, where I disagree with where Alex, and it's sort of maybe a nitpicking point of who's in charge and what was Joseph's intention was, he's the leader here. And Alex, thought that, thinks I'm portraying the Mormons as somewhat impetuous and maybe even irrational. And, and from the Mormons' point of view, this was very rational, that this is what we have to do to defend ourselves. And there was, there was the scriptural or scripture that Joseph revelation about how often do we have to bear a violence from our enemies. And it was, well, if they come against you 3 times and bear it, okay. But the 4th time, they're in your hands. And the Mormons have been driven from Jackson. They've been driven from Clay. They've been driven from Carroll. And now they're in our hands. And there was, very much a belief that, angels will fight on our side. Of course, God has called us to settle here. So there was a belief that everything would go okay, and whether that's rational or irrational, that they could burn down all these buildings and plunder and still prevail against the state. We'll let the reader decide.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with historian Steve LeSueur. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about who was the leader of the Danites. Was it Joseph Smith or Samson Avard?
So the question is, who is the leader of the Danites? Is it Avard or is it Joseph? Who demoted Avard?
It wasn't Avard.
No, it wasn't. and so, okay, and so again, Joseph isn't in these meetings directing every little thing, but it's to Joseph the Danites look for leadership, and it's to him they're swearing allegiance.
If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please subscribe to patreon.com/gospeltangents for just $5 a month. Patreon is spelled patreon.com/gospeltangents. If you'd like to watch the entire video, you can subscribe at YouTube, Patreon, or on my website at gospeltangents.com and click the yellow subscribe button for just $8 a month. PDF transcripts are just $10 a month, and you can get those on patreon.com/gospeltangents or on my website. I'll send those to you as soon as I've finished completing it. If you'd like to get a paperback and PDF, just subscribe for $20 a month at either Patreon or on my website. Individual paperbacks are available at Amazon.com. Just do a search for Gospel Tangents Interview, and you can find all of our past interviews there. Show your Gospel Tangents pride by purchasing a t-shirt on our website at gospeltangents.com/shop. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts at tinyurl.com/gospeltangents. You can get our latest updates by friending me at Facebook, or you can also follow our page at facebook.com/gospeltangents. Become an insider and you can see the newest videos. Follow us on Twitter at Gospel Tangents. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here we've got some of our great videos. Thanks again.